between Arabic, English, or French. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to cite some data. So Arab countries has got $39 billion, representing only 0.76% of deductions around the world. When we look at Takaful in the Arab world, its rate is 55% compared to the other rates around the world. Now, when we look at some details, when we take a look at the rate of Takaful as part of GDP in Arab countries, we'll notice that it's very small, 0.56% only, whereas the insurance rate in Arab countries, it's 1.5%. This means that Takaful is still small in terms of its share compared to conventional insurance, and that there is a great margin for the promotion of Takaful and Takaful. Now, taking a look at other figures, we will notice that general Takaful represents 83% with $12.3 billion, and family Takaful represents 17%. But the growth rate of general Takaful over the past 10 to 15 years has always been above that of conventional insurance. And the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia represents in this regard, on its own, 50% of the Takaful deductions, given that Saudi Arabia has a 100% Takaful-based system based on the 2004 law in its first provision. Now, when we take a look at Takaful, there's obviously a number of challenges, and there are opportunities. So, true Takaful in the past years has suffered from a number of setbacks and issues due to the nature of the markets and the fact that Takaful companies have moved closer to the insurance, medical insurance and car insurance, given that there are smaller emerging companies, but there are more successful companies in Takaful, and we will see with Mr. Usama Abdin a number of success stories, particularly in the Gulf region. Now, this is it really from me, although my introductory remarks were much more developed, but I would like to give the floor to my colleagues. And before I do so and give the floor to Mr. Idris, I would like to present you with the Mr. Youssef Fassi Fihri, who is the CEO of the SCR, the National Reinsurance Company in Morocco, whom I'd like to thank very much for his continued support. And it is true that he has been behind the organization of this webinar, because in a past meeting last summer, or rather just a few months ago in March, he proposed organizing this webinar around this theme. And so with your permission, Mr. Idris, I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Fassi Fihri to say his introductory remarks in 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Shakib.
And I would like first to present you very briefly SCR. SCR is a Moroccan reinsurer, started in 1960. It underwrites a business in Africa, Middle East, and some area in Asia and in the Turkish markets. And SCR underwrites business in life and non-life, FAC and TT. So Takaful is based on solidarity and risk-sharing principles. It's an Islamic form of financial protection, similar to conventional insurance, and it has been established and its modern form for more than 30 years. Nowadays, there are 3 leading countries in Takaful sector, as said Shakib, and concentrating about 85% of the total premium. Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Malaysia. And now the Moroccan government decided to launch this new line of business. So for us, it's an opportunity, but also there is a shortage of Takaful capacity but this offers great opportunity for Takaful operators to assist and participate in the growth and expansion of Takaful insurance. So Takaful is a promising market. First, the world, we have about 1.8 billion Muslims, represents a huge potential customer base, and Takaful contribution are forecast to grow roughly 6 times over the next decade. So there are currently more than 120 Takaful companies in operation worldwide. So Takaful is a very promising market, and the global market sales was nearly 5.5 billion US dollar in 2018, and we expected to grow and to attain 50 billion in 2026. In Moroccan markets, the current state in Morocco, we have a publication of the law on Takaful insurance was put in effect on August 2019. And the project awaits a publication in the official bulletin in the coming months. For us to support Moroccan companies makes perfect sense because it is a part of our DNA. To date, several Moroccan operators have expressed their interest in Takaful insurance in 3 products: debt, disability, and multi-risk building. For SCR, we are on the process of creating Takaful windows, and we have submitted an application for approval to our Moroccan authority. So SCR is considering a conscious start with active support for the national Takaful insurance market, especially with regard to the debt guarantees, which requires sustained technical assistance. It also plans to develop foreign business, starting from the stock of the current acceptance from certain Takaful operators in the Middle East, but also by investing in African markets with a strong Muslim community, which is the birthplace of Takaful insurance locally. So thank you. Thank you, Shakib. We can't hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fassifiri, and very relevant introduction. And thank you also for sponsoring this event on behalf of or with the SCR. I'd like now to pass on الكلمة ندوز الكلمة للأستاذ بوبكر.
Now we're going to give the floor to Mr. Boubkar Ajdir. Welcome, Mr. Ajdir.
Everybody, bonjour, salam alaikum wa rahmatullah. D'abord et avant tout, merci au GAIF. Merci.
Before anything else, thank you to GAIF. Thank you, Mr. Shakib, for giving us this opportunity to meet with you again and to be able to entertain this very overarching, structuring topic in the Islamic. Takaful is a topic of which we don't talk much whence the importance of the seminar. And thank you greatly to the partners, and once again to the GAIF and to you, Dries, and to Adika team for participating with us. Thank you to the SCR in the person of Mr. Fassi Fehri for all the work you're undertaking and also for sponsoring us on this event. Of course, the world of Islamic finance is evolving, and the Takaful industry certainly is evolving at a less sustained rhythm than that of the banking sector. In any case, in general, the sector of insurance is advancing less than the banking sector. Also, as we have just been hearing from Mr. Fassi Fehri, we heard that there are new entrants, including in North African countries, about which we will more lengthily talk later. And it therefore has proven necessary to stop and to take stock of the situation, first to capitalize the earlier experiences in other parts of the world. And we are also having a pleasure today to have speakers from different regions of the world, and hence this diversity and breadth of experience that we'll be able to share with the public and audience. And we'll see as to how we can capitalize these experiences to allow Africa, North Africa, more particularly West Africa, how we can allow these parts of Africa first to touch on and to start the nascent Takaful market while really seizing and using the good and grasping the good lessons and basing ourselves on the good lessons from other countries to allow this market to increase and to be better maybe than that of the other regions of the world. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity. Many, I think, has already been said during the introduction. We are not going to dwell on the introductory part. Suffice it now to start with the following presentations in a moment. Mr. Idriss, I give you back the floor unless you want me to continue on with the first panel. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Continue in English. Once again, a very warm welcome to all our participants from all over the world. As we received the hundreds of registrations, we realized together with dear Shakib and Booker and the organizing committee how much of an interest there is for what is considered to be a philosophy as much as it is an industry that's now spread across the world. And there is a real understanding that, of course, Takaful can be actually looked at from different perspectives, one being, of course, the regional penetration based on whether we're looking at Southeast Asia, the Middle East, or North Africa, or even, as dear Booker said, the sub-Saharan African region. And of course, there are other parts of the world where Takaful would have a good role to play. Now, we understand that, of course, going forward, there's going to be a number of questions to be asked, and one of which, or a number of which would be subjects about how Takaful is actually going forward in the current state of affairs in terms of what digitalization is all about, but also, there is a real subject about sustainability. And as in any industry that's actually focusing on risk management, Takaful is also not exempt of the concerns one may have on certain ethical matters, which we'll be able to talk about later on. Today, we have the pleasure of really welcoming a number of really very recognized subject matter experts in their fields who represent one of the largest organizations in terms of Takaful, general Takaful, but also family Takaful and Takaful, which will be the three segmentations we have allocated to this wonderful event of today. Well, once again, thank you to all our sponsors, so SCR, Société Centrale de Rassurance in Morocco, and Tunis Ray, and also to, of course, the co-organizer of this event, IFAS, and the teams who have been working so hard for the last few weeks to provide you with a wonderful event today. Without further ado, I would like to now give our dear participants the opportunity to tell us a bit more about who they are, where they are, and what they expect out of this event. We have, as we said earlier in the opening statement, decided that this event should be in all three languages, being Arabic, English, and French. For those of you who have joined us after the introduction, you may find at the bottom right of your screen the access to the language of your choice. We have the best interpreters out there to give you the best translation as we go on throughout the event. Also, for your own information, the event will be recorded so that if you have missed the first few minutes, you will have access to that at a further stage. Well, welcome again to everyone. And now, without further ado, we will go into the quiz, which will give you an opportunity to basically tell us who you are. So I'd like for the team to put this on the screen. Question number one, you have the option, so we need to click on the link, please. You will have access to a screen which will enable you to go directly online and respond to a number of questions, which will give us a chance to know exactly who you are, as you're quite a large number of participants today. May we have, please, the quiz through the link to appear online so that our participants can have access.
232 personnes présentes aujourd'hui au webinaire.
I am happy to be present with you today at this webinar. Côté interprétation, from the interpreter side, there is nothing being said to translate so far.
We will now, what we'll do, we will come back to this problem. We can still have access to that in a few minutes. Without further ado, what I propose to do is to go into the first panel, if I may have the slides, so that I can introduce the speakers. Thank you very much. So for this first panel, which is on general Takaful, I'm very happy to introduce to you the four panelists. So we have Mr. Osama Abdin, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Abu Dhabi National Takaful. He has an intensive experience in the actual field. And Mr. Mohammed bin Arbia will also be speaking as being the Director of Salama Assurance in our dear neighboring Algeria. And of course, we'll have as another subject matter expert who has a lot to say about the way the Takaful industry has been evolving. Sorry, as we talked about the fact that we will be having an outlook on what's been happening over the past 20 years and how we got to where we are today. And of course, what the perspectives for future developments are going to be. And so dear Shakib Abu Zaid will also be speaking as the Secretary General of the General Arab Insurance Federation, who's our kind event organizer. And as a moderator, you'll have Bukir Ajdir. We will then come back to the quiz in a second phase after we finish this panel, so you'll be able to tell us who you are exactly. And you'll find that very interactive as well. So please, without further ado, dear Bukir, the floor is all yours. And thank you to all our panelists and our dear participants. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Idriss. Est-ce que le son est bon?
Très bien. Thank you very much, Idriss. Is the sound good? Can you hear me well? Clear?
Est-ce que le son est bon?
Is the sound clear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Confirmation that the sound is good, that you can hear me. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Idriss, for this introduction. Thank you, Mr. Shakib. We're now going to really delve in the core subject on this panel with my dear guests, Mr. Shakib Abu Zaid, Mr. Osama Abdin, and Mohammed bin Arbia. Thanks to the experiences of these different persons, we are going to talk about general Takaful in the different regions of the world with two structurally different dynamics. First, in the Gulf countries with Osama and Shakib. Historically, there are many things that took place, and we're going to see the experiences also of Abu Dhabi Takaful, the national Abu Dhabi Takaful company, in order to really get more into the subject and how it took place a couple of years ago, and how they shouldered the COVID-19 crisis-induced situation. We are going to see together what is a vision of the Takaful future. And after that, of course, we will go from the Gulf country, we will wander to North Africa in order to see what's happening in the field of Takaful in our countries that we consider to be new entrants. Albeit in some countries in Algeria, there is already for many years now Takaful, but a market which is now embarking into a new dynamic since only a couple of months ago, a new regulatory framework. We are going to see as to how this regulatory framework will allow this Takaful market to maybe gain a greater footprint. Now we are going to start with Mr. Osama Abdin and with Mr. Shakib Abu Zaid. I'm going to once again switch from English to Arabic, from French to Arabic, to try and speak in the same language as the speakers. Mr. Osama, good afternoon.
Mr. Osama and Mr. Shakib, very warm welcome to you. Now, if possible, we could start our conversation with Mr. Osama with a short intro about the concept of Takaful insurance and your company, the Abu Dhabi National Takaful Company. And with Mr. Shakib, we're going to talk about the Takaful industry in the Gulf area. Over to you. Well, first of all, warm greetings to all of you. I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting and all actors who have put their efforts together to give us this beautiful topic on Takaful. First of all, Takaful is an idea. It's a concept that started being implied in the finance industry for about 20 to 30 years. And when we talk about Takaful, our name as a company, we're called Abu Dhabi National Takaful. We don't mention Islamic or whatever. We mention Takaful because this is an idea that emanates and takes inspiration from Islamic Sharia. But as any idea or concept, it is not limited to a particular audience. For instance, in our company, there are staff or consultants who come from different backgrounds, different faiths, given that they believe in the idea as a financial concept. And so we always like to formulate Takaful as a concept, as an idea that the other could see clear interests, whether they're from the West or the East. If they see that there is interest and potential benefit there, they adopt it. And I think this is very important in terms of awareness. And let me quickly here say that one of the large companies in Germany wanted to open a Takaful reinsurance branch. And they asked me a number of questions, and I responded and I said, even when it comes to investments, it is not a precondition to have a limited Islamic dealing, but there are certain aspects that need to be taken into account that will allow any party, any person, or any entity, regardless of their background, to adopt a form of takaful. With regard to our company, Abu Dhabi National Takaful Company, we are proud of this company that we deem to be one of the successful models of takaful, and we're looking forward to the success expanding throughout the takaful industry. Now, the concept of takaful, let me tell you that our company started working in 2004, and it has adopted various steps since 2010 to make sure that every profit center and that the focus of our work will be these profit centers, and to make sure that the companies will be based on the concept of takaful in their words and in their actions. And let me tell you that last year and the year before that, we have distributed 6.6 surplus dividends to its clients. And in 2019, we've distributed 4.4 million. And the shareholders in the company have achieved high profit margins and high revenue on equity, and we are the highest in the UAE among insurance companies for 10 years running. And so given this success, we are in a position to say that focusing on subscriptions and on adopting the various notions of takaful and the separation of accounts. And thirdly, we have to insist on the fact that takaful is not a charity work. There are some people who say, well, this company is working in charity. No, takaful is a business model that seeks to make profit and to distribute and share profit in certain aspects, and obviously to ensure complete protection for the security holders. So in short, the success of our company for the past 11 years now, every year its profits were increasing, its assets were increasing, and the rights of shareholders were increasing in a continued manner for 11 years, something that has drawn the attention of analysts and market players, because the sustainability aspect in our company was something highly felt, and its good performance has been sustained even during the very hard conditions of COVID-19. So this is what I wanted to share in terms of our experience at Abu Dhabi National Takaful Company in very few words, and regarding the Takaful insurance. And I insist on two key points there.
الربح، فنحن نريد أن نجذب رؤوس الأموال للاستثمار بالتكافل. ثانيا، هي تتبع ومستقاة من مبادئ الشريعة الإسلامية. هذه النقطتين
It's also in compliance with the Sharia principles, and these are the two most prominent issues for me. It's not exclusive to Muslims only, so it could be, and it's available for Christians and for any other believers or not, any persons interested in Takaful, and that's actually our motto and what we try to make prevalent throughout our marketing strategies. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Osama. So that was a very nice recap and in a nutshell, well-put summary of the whole concept. Allow me to tell you that we have an increasing number of participants. Our number amounts to 246 right now. Thank you, Mr. Osama. So you know that this discussion has been going on for a while. So in your opinion, what does it that distinguishes Gulf-based Takaful companies that exist in Bahrain, in KSA, and in United Arab Emirates, and where there were losses, deficits, and requests for loans and credits, while or versus other companies where there were profits that were made. So all this has cast doubt on the legitimacy of Takaful and Takaful companies in terms of their management. And since you're more knowledgeable than I am, bearing in mind that Takaful started with motors as well as medical services. Some of them actually did fail. I'm glad you spoke about the distribution of the insurance surplus, and I wish you could get back to this issue, in as much as this is the promise made by those Takaful companies to the shareholders. So I don't know whether my question is clear, Mr. Osama. Yes, for sure. Allow me to thank you, Mr. Shakib. Thank you, Shakib, for this plethora of questions. And from my standpoint, and out of personal conviction, and in the light of my experience, I would like to address all this briefly by saying that Takaful companies were born with the mindset of being results-oriented. So even the investors and capital holders, so many of the companies were not up to their requested threshold. And this issue of Al-Qard Al-Hasan is actually a holistic, exhaustive thing that need be shouldered by shareholders. So indirectly, should there be losses, the deficits should be assumed in terms of portfolios by the shareholders. They're the ones that need to shoulder the responsibility. Therefore, there is no interest whatsoever as to not making successful this Takaful fund for the shareholders. And in the light of the law, shareholders need to assume this responsibility. If results were not satisfactory and experiences were not satisfactory, but again, this is a personal point of view, and actually difference is a source of wealth. The Takaful companies were born during a high competitiveness era. They're very recent. At a time, economy was not in its best status. So Gulf-based companies such as in UAE, where companies were founded back in the 70s, some of them were created in the early years of the early 2000s, early 21st century. So when, as Mr. Shakib aptly pointed out too. So those shares, so from an insurance point of view, it was very difficult to manage, particularly regarding the motor as well as the medical, where there was a lot of competitiveness and where those companies were trying to obtain shares from the trademark to the detriment of the profits. So they wanted to have market shares by doing a kind of sub-tariffing, which had adverse effects and negative outcomes for the shareholders, and that was conducive to Al-Qard Hassan and even some shareholders, so did have some losses. So that is why we talk of an alternative modus operandi by seeking to use the sound foundations, so making use and resting upon the right reasonable tariffs, regardless of the losses in sectors such as automotive and motor. So when we emphasize on motor and automotive, so Abu Dhabi, the Takaful company is the local one where motor does not go beyond 10% of the total portfolio. So that's why the diversity of the portfolio will guarantee security. So when you have a company with general insurance, life insurance, with the diversity of distribution channels, including the direct ones, including brokers, bank insurance. So in my opinion, all those that have made this wise choice, so with the prosperous growth, not a growth that seeks to make profits at any cost. And this is what has actually allowed us to handle the most precarious conditions. But sometimes there are pressures exerted on the board and on profit making. So one does not need to be profit oriented exclusively, but rather so having sustainability in this profit making through technical aspects taken into consideration, the actuary aspects and the equity in the tariffs, together with quality services and the diversity in the portfolio. And this is what should allow for avoiding being entrapped in obtaining market shares without putting in place the right mechanisms, particularly under high competitiveness and fierce competitiveness with some firms. Booker, maybe you could ask questions to Mr. Mohammed in Arabic, and then I will take the floor again to ask a crucial question that I want Mr. Osama to address.
Well, it's well noted. Now we are going to travel from the Gulf countries to Africa with Mr. Mohammed bin Arabia, particularly to North Africa with the Algerian experience that is rather interesting. Mr. Mohammed bin Arabia, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar and thank you for your participation. Mr. bin Arabia, could you say something on the recent evolutions of Takaful in the Maghreb countries and also inform us whereby in this evolution, how is it that the Algerian experience is growing? Go ahead.
Floor is yours, Mr. Mohammed. In the name of Allah, most compassionate, most merciful, peace be on the Prophet, his kith and kin. Allow me to extend heartfelt thanks to the sponsors, panelists, and participants to this important webinar, including participants from various parts of the world and from the Arab world mainly. So Northern Africa, the Arab Maghreb, Africa in general, so we're lagging behind in terms of Takaful insurance because of secular, historical factors, but also of legal factors. So we saw the emergence of Takaful in Tunisia recently, together with Morocco, despite the fact that it is lagging behind the banking sector's evolution in Algeria, and as you should know. So there are laws that have been promulgated together with the finance bill of 2020 in order to address issues posed and encountered from a legal point of view. So in 2019, so there was the introduction of this Takaful systems to be added to the existing insurance system in the region. So to get back to the Algerian experience, so Algerian experience when it comes to Takaful insurance is related to the Salama insurance company in Algeria that at its beginnings was actually Al Baraka Insurance as a branch of the Al Baraka Bank in order to accompany the loans together with the promotion of the Takaful mechanisms beyond the banking sector. And despite the legal void and a vacuum that constitutes a major hindrance that need be surmounted, the Salama company has succeeded in obtaining an important share, i.e. 4% of the Algerian insurance shares. And this is what we find out in all the new emerging markets, positioning itself as a second private company, because as you know, public companies do prevail over the markets with the ratio of 75%. So this Salama company has become the second insurance private company. Could have been the first actually, but relying upon cautiousness. So we want to stick to being positioned in the second rank, taking into consideration the various profit regulations and compliance with Sharia principles when it comes to the Takaful mechanisms put in place in Algeria. After numerous years where there was such a legal haziness prevailing over the Algerian market, the company faced huge hurdles, including the fact that the Algerian law imposing the necessity of more than 50% of investments in terms of general treasury equities. So with the interest rates and in the absence of general standards that will allow for investment in compliance with the Sharia law, which of course did impact the company. However, in spite of all those hurdles, we have succeeded in imposing ourselves in the Algerian market. And before such a situation, we do hope that within the framework of the new laws and regulations, so there will be more visibility and clarity as to the duties and rights of the companies, be it for shareholders or for subscribers, actuaries, and so on and so forth. We do hope that there will be less red tape and more easiness as to conducting these investments within the framework of the new law. Thank you, Mohammed.
Well, a particularity of the Algerian market is as follows. Of course, the regulatory dynamics have made headway. The new decree in Algeria, the Tunisia is also a regulatory framework. Now, the CIMA also code in Western Africa and Central Africa has also has a dedicated Takaful. In these countries, we have a peculiarity in Algeria is that the Takaful market in Algeria is mostly led by the public banks. You've talked about the structures of the financial market of Algeria. of the banking and financial sectors. But the Algerian public banks have all embraced Islamic finance. First, according to you, this public force, al-Qawa al-Amma in Arabic, can it be a catalyst for Takaful? And if yes, how?
Obviously, and as I have already pointed out too, so within the banking sector in Algeria, so there is the prevalence of the public banks and the public sector, and this is going to be a great opportunity to further promote and develop Takaful insurance companies while opening channels for Islamic finance within the scope of the new laws and regulations on the banking sector. The Algerian Central Bank has promulgated laws allowing all banks to make room for the Islamic finance, and also creating 100% Takaful companies and Takaful insurance companies, just like the classical traditional ones that prevail in the Algerian market, while being open onto banking transactions, which actually makes it a fertile ground for the development of more Takaful companies. So there was cooperation amongst all stakeholders, including Salama, in order to have one single Takaful company that will encompass both the private and the public ones, with Salama as a Takaful company that will take in charge the management of the whole process. So there were some differences. There has been some significant progress over the past.
D'informer nos panélistes que nous avons encore 3 minutes avant de devoir arrêter ce panel. S'il vous plaît, pouvez-vous...
Mohamed, essaye de raccourcir. Barakallahu fik.
Please try and reduce or dovetail your comments, sir.
Thank you. So under the current situation, I'm saying that there is a great opportunity for widening the Takaful Algerian market while being open onto public banks. So the market allows for creating Takaful companies without having a high plethora and a huge number of companies, and then be stuck with the profit issues as well as the Sharia compliance issues. So the trend moves towards the creation of one public company for general Takaful, one for dealing with Salama, and one for family Takaful for the existing private banks besides Salama, as a Takaful company that has embarked on the regulatory compliance and regulations compliance, why in order to make it's so compliant.
We're going to come back to Mr. Shakib, Mr. Usama now. Mr. Shakib, a word on the future, if you may, on the future of Takaful in the Gulf countries. Can you please tell us a word on this?
بسأل سؤال لأسامة هو
My question for Usama is that Abu Dhabi for Takaful is a company that was founded by the Abu Dhabi Bank. So there is a kind of bank insurance there. For you, Usama, what would be the best business model? That the Takaful company be related to the bank, because those that are related and affiliated to the banks, so they are more successful, their outcomes are better, their profits are better, and the growth pace is also better. So in 1 minute, Mr. Usama, if you don't mind.
Mike, please, Usama. Micro, Usama, please.
أشكرك أخ شكيب صوتي.
Thank you, Shakib. Okay, can you hear me now?
مشكورين. أشكرك أخ شكيب على هذا السؤال المهم.
Thank you, Mr. Shakib, for this important question. bank insurance is one of the main crucial channels when it comes to the distribution of the products of the Takaful insurance. So it's one of the efficient existing channels. So yes, it has been built by the Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank, and it's one of the main shareholders. For the banking insurance, the channels of distribution are very important and allow for profit making. However, it does have other channels. This channel of the Abu Dhabi bank insurance represents 19%, 19% by the end of last year, 19% of the company's shares, which is a very important share, not only with the Abu Dhabi Islamic Bank, but with the plethora of other Islamic banks. So my advice to the brothers from the Arab Maghreb, so I had the honor to receive a delegation from the insurance sector from Morocco, a sisterly nation. So, and these brothers wanted to make more effective the Takaful system together with its mechanisms. So we had roundtables for over 3 days, and they had a very good idea about the existing regulations that are Takaful related. And one of the important questions I've encountered in the chat box that I would like to address very briefly here, I'm going to answer in a generic manner while endeavoring to address the various questions displayed. So one of the participants wrote that it's profit making. However, there is no contradiction or paradox whatsoever from a religious point of view to seek making profits. And then whether Takaful is inspired from Islamic Sharia, yes, indeed it is. The answer is the affirmative. So we make use of mudaraba in investments of the shares of the shareholders and wakala as well in the same process. Thirdly, how could we have a Takaful adopted worldwide? So at the level of our company, so we have a very good international ranking, because any successful business model, so on the basis of merit, will have a very good reputation and will become prevalent worldwide.
I'd like and thank all of you for your intervention. We're going to stop here at the first panel because time is of the essence, and I do not want to encroach on the time dedicated to the next panel. Now, Mr. Idris, I'll give you back the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Osama, Mr. Shakib, Mr. Mohammed bin Arabia from Algeria. Thank you very much. And I will meet you for the next panel. Dear panelists, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Booker, for this introduction onto General Takaful. We are more than 250 that have joined our webinar. It is also important that we can hear you instead of only asking questions on chat. You will also be given the opportunity to ask questions with the quiz tool that I'm going to introduce to you now on the screen. So we are going to post on the chat the link and the code, which you already have. That's the... oui, je suis désolé de pas...
And so with this question, we will identify how many people actually have an interest from both genders. Please take the time to answer, because we will then get to the more serious questions, which are about, for instance, your expectations from this event. And of course, when we get to developing further into the discussions, we'll be able to meet some of those expectations. So what you have to do is click on the link in the discussion or go to www.menti and enter the code that shows on the screen, 96331594. Please take the time to answer this first question, which will give us a chance to know who is actually with us today. And welcome to all our dear participants. You are more than 250 to be with us today from all over the world, of course.
عدد السيدات لا بأس به 36%. ممتاز. أنا أول شيء بدي أعتذر من كل السيدات.
36%, that's not bad. I do apologize because we were supposed to have women panelists. So I do apologize to all the ladies, but the lady whom we asked to attend with us as a panelist, so she has not been able to join us, but I do promise that in the very near future we will have women panelists contributing with us in facilitating and presenting the various panels of the upcoming webinars we shall organize. So shall we proceed?
So we go back into the subject, but I'd like to know which country you're from. This is important as well. So technically now we should have, if we can move to the next question, please. Oh, we have now the question appearing. So here is now a representation of who is actually today attending this event. With the word cloud principle, as you all know, the representation that's the largest appears as the largest word at the center. So it's interesting to know, and please take the time for all of you to answer, as the next question will be about your expectations. One of the further questions. For our dear participants, this will only take 5 minutes. And we will make up on the next panel for that time, obviously. But the idea is that we do know who is here, and this will keep us some good statistics going forward. As soon as we reach a few more answers, we'll move on to the next question. And now it's interesting to know who already works in and who has an interest to actually come into the Takaful sector. We will stay 1 minute on that question until we decide to move to the next one. And you can quickly see from the attendance that not everyone attending today is actually from the Takaful sector, which tells us quite neatly that there is a very keen interest. And one of the questions we saw appearing in the chat was, you know, would Takaful actually be something that would work in the Western world? And the answer, I suppose, is going to be clearly developed today throughout the different speeches to explain to us that actually it works anywhere. It's just a matter of adopting the philosophy behind it. So we have a majority of people going into the Takaful, but also some conventional insurers and reinsurers and other sectors. Some people from the public sector. We also have people from the regulator, which is very nice. Welcome to those of you who actually are involved in the policy writing and deployment as well. It's important to know that obviously Takaful is a very regulated industry, as you all know. And a few people who are specialized in Takaful. We will now move on to the next question, but feel free to join along as you come on. Now we'd like to know what your profiles are so that our speakers can actually level with the general trend, but it's also interesting to know how the different organizational structures are represented today. Normally the trend tends to be fairly along the line of what a large organization, whether it should be Takaful or normal conventional insurance, I should say conventional, apologies for that. But you can see that, of course, you do have the top management people and quite a few senior management, you know, C-level managers, but also board members, CEOs, and a few students. It was interesting for us to know that some students were also invited to this event, as they will be the leaders of tomorrow, as you all know. So sustainability is also about people, obviously, as we all know. Some experts are present, so this raises the bar for our subject matter experts today, who are going to be giving their insights on the best practices out there and how the industry has been shaping up over the last 20 years and how it's going forward. And we'll now move on to the next question, which is a very important question. And I'll invite all our speakers to actually pay as much attention as they can, because obviously some of the developments they will be making today can be inspired from what is appearing on the screen as we go along. So you'll have to type out in English preferably, but if you want in French or in Arabic, there is no issue with that. What's your one main expectation you want to get out of this event? And after that, we'll move on to the panel, obviously. If you could have the responses on the screen, please, so we may see the results. Can we have, please, the results on the screen for the organizers so we can see the responses? These are very important responses. We have not lost the screen. Thank you very much. So this is really for all our speakers. And we can see the questions or the expectations scrolling on the screen. And obviously, we can hear keywords appearing here, such as innovation, understanding what the insights of the markets are, and to learn about the reality of Takaful insurance. Some of you may be new to the industry. It doesn't matter what your seniority level is. I'd like to welcome on behalf of all the panelists and the organizing committee, all the new members to this industry. If we may see the screen, please. So here we have the answers. So I'd like for all our speakers to note some of the expectations that are actually shown on the screen. Thank you very much for keeping on that slide. Thank you. And we see what the perspectives are. So we're really in the heart of the subject of today. So just to remember and remind to all our dear participants, and now we'll move on to the next panel. But before so, I'd just like to bring back the attention and on what has actually been decided for today's event. We will be looking, I've already been looking in the introductory panel, which was about general Takaful, back in time to understand how we got to where we are today. And you know, what shapes up the industry worldwide today. And for that, I'm happy to now welcome our two next speakers, and we will show them quickly on the screen. You will see their presentations. So we have dear Marcel Omar Pap, who's talking to us from Kuala Lumpur. Welcome to you, dear Marcel. And we have Mohamed Sgher. You can see the functions. They both have a very intensive and extensive knowledge of the industry, obviously. And I was happy to find out when we were preparing the moderation together of this wonderful panel that they actually work together. So you will see that there's quite a bit of synergy between them as well. As you well know, this industry is people business to begin with. So now that we have the good insight on what the general Takaful context is, let's now dive deep into what family Takaful is. And to you, dear Marcel, here's the first question I have is, you know, what actually has shaped up this wonderful part of the industry that has to deal with the people? Can you welcome to you there, Marcel, and thank you for being on this panel. You have exactly 5 minutes to give your intro on that, and then we obviously will ask our dear Mohammed to give us his insights as well. How do we get to where we are? Thank you.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this distinguished panel. As Dries told you, I'm actually located in Malaysia. Therefore, let me share with you the experience here, as Malaysia is one of the key Takaful markets, and actually looking at the current state and past experience. As we all know, 2020 has been a very difficult year across the globe. Also in Malaysia, as GDP has actually reduced by 6%. However, insurance industry was not so much affected because they managed to have the same premium income as in previous years, and family Takaful even could further increase the contribution income by 7%. And this is not a one-off. Actually, annual growth has been around 11% every year in the past 5 years. And by this, it's much bigger than growth on the conventional side. So what are the reasons for the success of family Takaful in Malaysia? There are a few. Let me share a few. First is regulatory support. The first Takaful operators in Malaysia were established in the 1980s, and already in 1984, the Takaful Act was introduced in Malaysia to govern conduct of Takaful business and the establishment of Sharia committees. Soon later on, Takaful came under the supervision of the central bank, Bank Negara Malaysia. Already in 2001, the government launched the financial master plan, which put a lot of emphasis on Islamic finance and Takaful. And in 2013, the Islamic Financial Services Act was introduced. So there is a very robust regulation in Malaysia. And the regulator even gave initially incentives to Takaful operators. So they gave some less regulatory hurdles than for conventional companies to boost the industry. Now that the industry has reached a market share of more than 20%, now there is a level playing field. The second reason, besides of the regulatory support, is the preference by the government for Islamic finance and Takaful. So government schemes are usually on Takaful basis. Government-linked companies buy usually Takaful and not conventional insurance. The third reason is there are very strong Islamic banks in Malaysia. So there, Banca Takaful is a key distribution channel besides of agency. And there are many Islamic investment instruments available where the industry can invest in. Another key reason for the success of family Takaful in Malaysia is the interest by multinational companies. Actually, initially, only local companies set up Takaful operator, but around 15 years ago, multinational companies entered the market, and by this, professionalism has markedly increased, and also the local companies have beefed up their game. Also in Malaysia, there is an increasing awareness of Islamic finance. There are many Islamic financial education schools and universities focusing on Islamic finance. I think another key reason is that the regulator has only allowed a limited number of Takaful companies in the market, so 4 on the general side and 11 on the family side, and there are no windows allowed. So you are only allowed to have fully fledged companies, and they have to be very professional. And given the fact that they are not so many companies, because there is also here in Malaysia only limited talent, so that helps that they not too many companies compete for the talent. Another key success factor is the appeal to non-Muslims. So Takaful is not only sold to Muslims, but in Malaysia there are over 30% non-Muslims. And they also buy Takaful because companies tend to share surplus. So for them, the surplus sharing is appealing. And many of my non-Muslim friends also buy Takaful policies. And one last reason is that agents are quite well trained because they have to get the certification on Takaful before they can sell Takaful policies. So there is less danger of mis-selling. Naturally, there's still some.
May I ask that you wrap up with 1 or 2 points, and then we will go and have an outlook on the Middle East to see what Mohammed has to tell us about his benchmark.
Actually, this is all. Naturally, I just want to say that this is not the only way to success. Indonesia has taken a completely different road in Takaful, but they are also quite successful with annual growth rates of over 10%. But here, the high growth is really driven by a few companies which are successful, whereas the rest of the market is not so successful. Yeah, with this, let me hand over to my friend Mohammed.
Thank you, Marcel.
Mohammed, thank you for giving us your insight on what the actual state of the industry is in the Middle East. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcel.
Thank you.
بس لحظة بس لو سمحت يا إدريس.
Just 1 second, Idris. Just one quick comment regarding Mohammed Al-Saghir. Mohammed Al-Saghir, given his experience, in Takaful, I wish that you could tell us about the pension side of Takaful, because this is something that you take great interest in, that is of great interest to our audience, because as we heard from Osama earlier, there's a bank insurance aspect and links between banks and Takaful, but we'd like also to understand how Takaful can help with pension funds. Thank you.
Hello, bonjour, everybody. So I'll do this part in English just for the for having the whole panel in English. I think it will be easiest to do it like this. So I just would like to thank the GAIF for this initiative as well and for pushing such a topic. And linking back as well to your question, Shakib, on the pension, you know that pension and the pension gap that we see in the Middle East and North Africa is a huge topic, and it's a society challenge for all of the countries. And clearly we can see that family Takaful, which is the life insurance version of Takaful, is something which will come as well in helping building up this industry, which today is very, very small in the Middle East. When we look at family Takaful in the region and why it has not achieved what it should have been achieved yet, we can see a few things. First, there was a mission of financial inclusion. So clearly it was a way to include people who will not get the conventional life insurance for economic reasons or for religious reasons. The other thing as well that we see, and that's exactly linked to the pension question, is life insurance in general is underdeveloped, is underpenetrated in the MENA region for a variety of reasons. One of them is the demographic gap and mix that we have in the region. The other one is the lack of awareness as well of people around questions around the gap in protection and pension. And also what we see more and more is that there is a very slow adoption of the digital solutions. And by that, we see that the accessibility of the product is actually less for the younger generations than it was for the previous generation. So when we see that these products are less and less accessible, we can actually realize that the customers, the customers who normally would buy family Takaful products actually struggle to do it. The Takaful companies are by definition mostly startups and have to compete on markets where you already have established life insurance companies. And it's very hard to scale up quickly and to be able to compete with companies who are around on the market for 5, 10 years or even more, who already have a solid expense base, have invested in systems, in other solutions, which then creates this issue for people to be able to tap into the potential of family Takaful. So all in all, the picture which is being given for Southeast Asia has a lot of very positive points. It's something which comes from a very long time, as Marcel said. It started in 1984. What we can see is that in the Middle East, every country has a different speed of development on family Takaful. There is also an issue in terms of industry or regulatory support. We all work in markets where we have hybrid competition, meaning that being a Takaful company, you will compete against a non-Takaful company. And we don't have regulations which are actually pushing or favoring, privileging Takaful companies toward non-Takaful companies. And for me, it's a bit, I think, one of the solutions which could happen for the development of pension solution on the individual side or on the corporate side would be to have a push from the regulators or from the industry to make sure that we have more solutions which are in line with what the customers would expect. And I think that all in all, when you see at the ecosystem that we have in the Middle East for family Takaful, is clearly lagging behind what we see in Southeast Asia. And I think that Marcel, perhaps you wanted as well to speak about the value-based intermediation in Southeast Asia, in Malaysia.
Yes.
In particular.
And thank you very much. Before we go to that, and thank you so much, dear Mohammed. This was really a nice overview and for keeping up with the time as well. So for you, Marcel, maybe before you go into what the future perspectives would be, And I will ask a question again to dear Mohammed about how he sees the way going forward on a couple of points, namely issue such as ethical matters and so on. But can you please tell us first of all what you think about what Mohammed just said? What is your reaction from the part of the world you're actually sitting in at the moment?
No, I mean, knowing a bit the Middle East, having traveled together with Mohammed in the Middle East, I fully agree with him. He also mentioned a very important point concerning digitalization. Interestingly, in Malaysia, actually, the Takaful companies were the ones who adopted digitalization first, and that has really helped in growing their market share. So I see this also as a way to get to the younger generation and also to the low-income generation, which might not be yet so familiar with the concept of Takaful or protection.
Is there anything else you would like to add, dear Mohammed, about the future perspectives? Of course, you talked about digitalization. We touched upon the subject of making this really a more inclusive industry. And, there is a lot of, there's almost a race between the conventional insurers and the Takaful insurers as far as the inclusion is happening. What can you tell us about that in a couple of words, and then we'll move on to the last part for dear Marcel, which will conclude our panel, obviously.
I would say that's very interlinked, actually, because by going through digitalization, you actually have two benefits. One is that you are reducing your expenses. So basically, you can address a segment of the population which can afford less the conventional life insurance, let's say. And the other one as well is that it's more appealing to the younger generation. So it's much more appealing for them to go through digital solutions. And you are doing this technology leap that you need to go in your development. Instead of having the conventional way to develop your industry, you can directly jump one or two steps of evolution. And that's clearly what the Takaful companies should take the lead on.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, dear Mohammed. And obviously, we're talking about a modernizing and modernized industry. So here it is. I mean, there's something that just came out very recently in the press. And dear Marcel, you were kind enough to share with us what is now called a very new perspective for development as being the value-based intermediation for Takaful. May I just point out some of the main headings that appear in that sort of new subject that's come out in the press recently, and you'll tell us about it. Of course, it's something that's been worked on for quite some time. This is really like a way to look into how we can leverage on the low penetration of the Takaful industry. And of course, there is a big subject at the heart of the discussions right now, which is sustainability as well. What can you tell us about this, Marcel?
Yes, I mean, despite of all the success we had here in Malaysia, there are still some challenges. Penetration is still lower than we want to, especially we can't, the current products are not really meeting the needs of some of the target segments, such as the low income group, and there is still awareness and financial literacy could be better. So to tackle these challenges, the Malaysian Takaful Association actually has developed this so-called value-based intermediation for Takaful framework. It's really the aim is to transform the industry towards achieving meaningful growth through a value-based and value-driven agenda. The whole framework is really based on 4 underpinning thrusts. First is financial resilience, community empowerment, good self-governance, and best conduct. The framework really highlights the guiding principles, key implementation strategies, performance measurement, and enhanced disclosure. And really the aim is to create value for the Takaful operators, for government and regulators, and also for the society as large. Listening to this, such a framework is very similar to a ESG or sustainability framework, but contrary to a ESG framework, it is underlined with the Maqasid Sharia, with the objectives of Sharia. So this framework, as you mentioned, was just launched 2 weeks ago by the Malaysian Takaful Association, and in the next step, very crucial will be the implementation. But this framework really, it's something any Takaful operator, not only in Malaysia, but around the globe should aspire to, because Takaful it's about profit making, but not only. You have to provide more value to the customer and to the society at large. And this framework really helps in doing so. And I hope other countries will take this as an example as well. You're on mute, Dries.
Thank you very much, Marcel.
Just one question, if you can. سؤال لو سمحت إدريس، في مجال سؤال.
مرحبا.
Can I just ask one quick question, Dries? Can I ask one quick question, please, to both Mohammed and Marcel? With regard to bank insurance, how do you see bank insurance? Can it help expand the Takaful market? Can it help it develop?
So how can the bank insurance make the Takaful industry grow, basically? How can the market penetrations increase thanks to bank insurance? Both of you. So this is for Marcel and Mohammed, and really 30 seconds, 1 minute tops, so we can finish up on time.
So I will start. I would say that.
Yes, please, Mohammed. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. I was saying, so we can clearly see that Islamic banks actually did a lot of efforts in education and awareness in the last years, and I feel that they could actually use this, the positive momentum they use in the communication to really stress on points which are clearly towards savings and protection. And they can really be the engine of growth for Takaful. But for that, you need a real integration. You need really an alignment of interests, and that's not always easy because you have a layer of regulation, commissioning, and so on, which does not always make it so appealing for the back Takaful operators. But clearly, they can be the actual drivers of the growth for Takaful and family.
Fantastic. Takaful. Thank you very much, dear Mohammed, and on to you, my dear Marcel.
Yes, I can just echo what Mohammed said, but it's one of the drivers. It should not be the only one. There are other distribution channels, as we mentioned, which are also important, like direct or agents. They will also remain important. Mm-hmm. I think for a successful company, you need all channels. You can't just rely on one channel only.
Thank you very much, and appreciate, gentlemen, your time and the impactful responses you gave within the time frame allocated. Just one word of finish for my part. We all realize that as the mega trends are reshaping the world's economies, and of course the way we go about handling matters, both economically and socially speaking, so does Takaful evolve. And so we're very happy to hear that there are new frameworks out there, provided of course the regulators play their part. So obviously I can hear the message being sent out to the regulators as well to be as ever involved in shaping up the future of the industry with all the stakeholders. Thank you very much from our part on behalf of the two panelists, and I'd like now to hand over the next part to our dear Shakib and Bubker, who will present you Takaful. We will then finish off with a series of questions using the quiz tool again. And please do prepare your questions as of now, and also do think about who you would like to ask the question to. So the more specific you are, the more targeted is question, the quicker you get a good answer to that. One more thing from my part, whatever information we can share with you on the different subjects will be put on the platform of the event. You'll have communication from the organizers thereafter. Thank you very much. On to you, my dear Bubker, dear Shakib.
Just a quick comment here. It's hard for the speakers to answer all of the questions in the chat because we have over 200 participants, and some of the guests are telling us, why aren't you answering our questions? Well, the problem is time is of the essence. So we have way more questions than the time allotted for the webinar. So if you have a question, please, I will have no problem giving a response later on. You could email us or message the panelists for answers to come later on. Now we give the floor to Bubker regarding the third roundtable on Takaful.
on a parlé
Well,
de...
thank you very much, Shakib. I will only speak French now. We talked about Takaful, we talked about life insurance. We are now going to talk about reinsurance. And once more, I am very pleased to have Shakib with us, who's got over 20 or 30 years experience in that Takaful, and also Mr. Akub, who's got extensive experience, and we will be able to enrich this webinar with your contributions. Mr. Mohammed Akub, I was pleased to meet him a few years ago when he was Director General of Hanover Great Takaful in Bahrain some 7 years ago. Mohammed Akub, I'd like to welcome you. As I've said, you have about 30 years experience, and particularly from the Hanover Takaful perspective, where you spent many years, some 15 years, I believe. Could you speak to that experience and share with us the lessons learned from your experience within Hanover Takaful?
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to the participants and also to the fellow speakers. It's very interesting to participate in this, and thank you for the sponsors as well. Look, I think perhaps I would just like to preface my entree into Takaful and Takaful for the benefit of also the participants. I started my career in Takaful in 2003 in South Africa. Many people don't know that we have a Takaful company in South Africa. I see most of the texts always omit that, but I think it's appropriate for me to even focus on this. In 2003, we took the proposal to Hanover in South Africa to let us start a Takaful company. I call it a company because there's no regulations in South Africa for Takaful. So we started a MGA, a managing general agent, supported by Takaful, by Hanover South Africa. And surprise, surprise, we started that with the princely sum of $25,000. Okay, but we had researched the issues, and we used the South African insurance regulations to dovetail the company. Today, alhamdulillah, it's still in existence and doing about $25 million of business. Okay, you have to understand that the Muslim population is only around 3% in South Africa. Therefore, the business comes from a wide spectrum of people, not only Muslims. Okay, and with that brief history and a little bit that we learned in South Africa, we approached the board of Hanover in Germany to support the establishment of a fully fledged, probably the first international Takaful company. And I have to say that they had a leap in faith and provided us with a capital of $60 million paid up to start this Takaful company in Bahrain. At that time, to my knowledge, there was only one other fully fledged company in the Middle East, and that was Takaful, which was run by Shakib. So the only history that we had in Takaful was that the promoter initially at that time was Takaful, the Takaful company or Takaful company that Shakib had established. So at the initial stages, I have to say that there was competition, yes, but there was complementary discussions between the Takaful companies at that time. Why? Because there was no textbook on Takaful at all. Okay, so we had to devise the documentation and the textbook itself. So there was a lot of discovery to be done, discussions with Sharia, Shakib, myself, people like Marcel Paps, Umar in Malaysia. We talked a lot about the things to try and establish the background and the foundations for Takaful. I think these are important issues because there was no research at that time on how and why. On the regulation side, there was an absence of frameworks for Takaful. All regulations were devised for the regional on a regional basis, be it Malaysia, be it UAE, and so forth. There was no all-encompassing re-takaful regulations. And you can well imagine that as a re-takaful, as an international re-takaful, we were doing business across the world. So we had, for example, the Saudi cooperative model. We had the Malaysian Wakala Mudaraba model. We had the Bahrain and UAE Wakala model. We had the Iranian model, which is different. Then we have the Sudanese model. They are all different in complexity, okay? And that had to be consolidated into one model where you were domiciled. If you were domiciled in Bahrain, you had to ensure that it all conforms with the Wakala model. If you were in Malaysia, you had to do the combination of Mudaraba, Wakala, and so forth. Now, in the absence of an accurate regulation, you can well imagine the amount of work and research that had to be done to ensure, firstly, regulatory compliance, and more importantly, Sharia compliance as well. Because the Sharia board would say, we wanted pure Wakala, and you could not accommodate it because the model coming out of Malaysia had a Mudaraba element. And it needed a lot of research and a lot of ijma and Ittihad with Sharia scholars who, I have to be honest, were open to these discussions. But more importantly, they were willing also together with us to learn. And this was the foundation. And I think I want to preface that because it's so important to understand the development. So perhaps that just gives the foundation. I hope, Abubakar, that it helps a little bit as to what happened there. I want to say a little bit about it, and Shakib, please support me on some of the issues. Unfortunately, in 2015, there were approximately over 35 re-takaful companies of various sorts, fully fledged, either or a division and so forth, or windows. Today, a number of them are not there anymore. And this is quite, despite the fact that we're seeing the Takaful projections today at 2020, they were around 25 billion. The projection is that in 2026, it's going to be around the 50 billion mark. So almost double in about 6 years. However, it's all very well to be able to give these big numbers, okay? However, the devil, as they say, is in the detail, okay? And what are the details? The details are that these companies, a number of them, unfortunately, re-takaful had to close for many, many reasons. I'll just cite a few, and Shakib will support others that he might think of. Critical mass and diversification. You need that in a re-takaful company because you have high severity risks that you take onto the books. Then profitability. We cannot run a re-takaful company with the expectations that we're going to make profits every year. I mean, in our case, I think the first 5 or 6 years was in deficit. Now, what does that mean? That means that we need shareholders who are resistant and tolerable to be able to sustain these losses so that the future can be bright.
The patience, yes, the key word, yes.
Exactly, absolutely. Then the technical expertise. Re-takaful was in its infancy, therefore all the technical expertise had to be brought on board. So these are also some of the features that we need to establish a fully fledged takaful. Then there was capacity constraints for regional reinsurers. They could not have enough capacity either because of capital or that they just didn't have enough business and so forth. Conventional placements were being done in parallel to re-takaful on the basis of durura. Okay, and we can argue about that, whether durura is applicable or not, but the fact of the matter is these are this. And then there was a lack of retrocession. Okay, a huge lack of retrocession. I would be bold enough to say even today that is still there. So you can see that I in a nutshell, I'm trying to establish why there has been a lack of huge success in the Takaful industry. I will stop there,
Okay.
Muka, and maybe Shakib would like to add, and then we can. I'd like to see this interactive so that it's more beneficial to the participants.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Brother Mohammed. Si Shakib, à votre tour, effectivement, vous, comme je le disais en introduction, vous avez une longue expérience. Vous avez également...
I said in my introduction, Mr. Shakib, you have quite an experience, and you were also CEO of Takaful Ray. Just in the same context that Mohammed Yaqub has described, he's closed his address by addressing failures. So what is it that you can tell us? What are the lessons that one may learn from such failures?
I would like to thank Mohammed Yaqub, who has pointed out to various issues at stake encountered by the Takaful companies. I had an experience with two Takaful companies, one hybrid, one's half hybrid and half conventional, but in the absence of regulatory framework, the proper one, we were not fully fledged as a company. I also contributed with some brothers in the creation of another Takaful company, and some of the hurdles that we encountered were related to what Mr. Yaqub has mentioned, namely our misunderstanding of the very nature of Takaful and the very misunderstanding of Takaful by many people, while encountering major difficulties in dealing with many companies who were more accustomed to conventional types of mechanisms, and they couldn't see the added value of Takaful and Takaful. That was one major hurdle that hampered our progress. And then there was also the fact that people had to have a lot of stamina. Profits couldn't be made over a year or two. Mohammed Yaqub and myself, we used to exchange our outputs and outcomes and kept commenting. So at the level of Hanover, they accepted the losses and deficits over 6 or 7 years. But unfortunately, their counterparts in other companies did not have enough stamina, did not have enough patience, and there was lack of technical expertise because the Hanover and the Swiss and American companies, so the Swiss Takaful with Marcel Omar, or Hanover with Adham now, or Mekkah, so they are largely supported by the other companies, so by the headquarters. There was also the diversity in portfolios. So when you have a company that exclusively works on Takaful worldwide with 240 companies, they don't necessarily all have positive outcomes. So we used to have with mainly motor Takaful companies that did have a lot of losses. So the line of business that normally supports Takaful companies, so initially and from the very beginning, one that was characterized by major losses. So when you overburden a company with supplementary losses, of course, this is conducive to deficits. So there was a problem of technical expertise. The headquarters were not supportive enough, together with the necessity of having a diversified portfolio. So whether now Takaful has a future or a good future or not, so I'm of the strong advocates of Takaful and Takaful. But of course, we need to have independent companies or companies with major distribution channels. But the other companies, particularly Arab companies for such as Arab REIT, Kuwaiti. So the latter need to actually support the Takaful industry, because we don't necessarily need to have foreign leaders all the time. And it is my firm conviction that should the national and regional companies invest in Takaful, they are doomed to succeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakib. Mr. Mohammed, can you please react on the roles that the reinsurers can play in the promotion of Takaful as an add-on to what Mr. Shakib said? Can you please elaborate on that and can you say a word on that?
I think first and foremost, the role of the Takaful companies should be to enhance training. I think training is an absolute essential. Not only the training of Takaful, which I think is adequately done at various levels, but the training of Takaful and how it operates and what are the requirements of the Takaful companies to provide the business with treaty capacity or facultative capacity. That's the first issue. And then I want to touch, if you permit me, Buka, to see, and the question which you raised earlier is, how can the regional Takaful companies or reinsurance companies support this? Now, when we look at that, and Shakib has just mentioned that, I think with the very few exceptions, most of the Takaful companies, lead companies are multinational Takaful companies, the Hanover Re, Swiss Re, Munich Re, etc. So the point here is that how do we encourage the regional reinsurers or Takaful companies to play their primordial role in this? Okay, and I stand to criticism when I say that the multinational Takaful companies, are allowed in a certain way to support unbalanced portfolios. Okay, so they shy away, and I've seen that the companies, smaller companies who have just established and do not have critical mass, have difficulties in finding capacity to place their business. Yes, when we have frequency business, which is small, it's fine. But when you have severity, severity business, high-rise buildings, and so forth, there's difficulty. So a thought that crossed my mind was that to be able to do this, we need the regional Takaful companies to talk to the Takaful companies, the new ones as well, more particularly, and I'm speaking more, let's say, the North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, rather than the GCC, which is, in my view, reasonably well established already. So if we say that there needs to be a discussion held on the size of the treaty capacities of each of these companies, they should be, in my view, almost similar in structure. So you can have 5, 6, 7, 8 of these companies in a similar structure. This will then enable regional reinsurers to support these reinsurers and Takaful, of course, to support these with lead shares, okay? Rather than because of one having a huge capacity relative to the other, and then we leave all the business to the major reinsurers. I think there has to be that basis of cooperation, and I'm going to lean on my brother Shakib to raise this at GAIF as well, and to see how this can be done to support that. Yes, we might need a reinsurance broker to support this, but use that as a platform to, how can I say, to obtain Takaful capacity for 5 or 6 or 7 companies on the basis of a balanced portfolio. Because otherwise we will always find that they either get no capacity because they are too small for the international Takaful operators, and then we wonder why there is no success. And this has been the past experience, and I'm sure our colleagues from North Africa will support what I've just said on that. And perhaps there's a need through GAIF maybe, or through the regional institutions try and support that. Okay. And then one more issue is that I think we need to use the muscle of GAIF and Shakib's organization to provide probably a pool, okay, for Takaful faculty of business and for treaty business. I think the expertise is there, but we need the support so that we can really establish what I would call a regional framework for Takaful.
Merci beaucoup, Sir Mohammed, pour cette.
Mr. Mohammed, thank you very much for this sharing of experience. Well, we have a couple minutes, 5 minutes, no more. We wish to capitalize your respective experiences, yours, Mr. Mohammed Akub and Shakib Buzaid. Capitalize this and make it available for the new entrants. What would your recommendations be for the new entrants? How to capitalize the successes and to avoid reproducing the mistakes. Mr. Shakib, maybe what would your recommendations be? And we will be back to Mr. Mohammed Akuba right after that.
The recommendations put forward by Mr. Yaqub are very important recommendations because we are evolving in a region with $99 billion, so as Takaful shares. However, the reinsurers, regionally, we have 23 mainly. So we also have a Takaful window in Morocco. Algeria also should have one. So we need to think out of the box. What was said by Mr. Mohammed on pooling and retrocession. So if regional reinsurance companies, Takaful companies, if they could support their counterparts, so whenever there's possibility of streamlining those capacities, particularly that the Tunisian brothers do have an excellent model, because the Takaful in Tunisia could be very beneficial in as much as this is an experience to be emulated in Algeria, Kuwait, and any other country where there is Takaful. So actually, the national reinsurer or the regional one is the one that should be supportive, but provided his technical performance is amended, is promoted and upgraded, because you need to have high technical support, high technical capacities, as long as you work on rating. With all these ingredients being pooled, so those companies can easily access the Takaful. The Takaful companies need also be fully aware that if their outcomes are negative, so it can't be forever supported by the national or the regional reinsurance company, because otherwise we become in a charity-oriented approach. So we can't keep supporting companies that keep accumulating losses. So we're under the umbrella of the General Arab Insurance Federation. We welcome the idea, and we have the committee for the Arab insurers. So it would be an honor to organize a pool and to streamline ideas and insights in order to extend the support to the Takaful companies. One last piece of advice for those companies: stamina. Without the commitment of the investors and the stamina, the Takaful cannot be a success. Thank you, Mr. Shakib.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Thank you very much, Brother Driss. Just the final word to Mohamed Akoub has a conclusion and your recommendation for the new entrants. Votre conclusion et vos recommandations pour les nouveaux entrants, s'il vous plaît. Barakallahu fik.
Shukran, Bobekar. I think Shakib has summarized this very well. My only contribution additional to that would be, it is time that we have a regional Takaful forum, okay, to support the project, and I can assure you that through the good offices of Shakib and GAIF, this is possible, inshallah. I can see that because at the practical level, we always will find the smaller Takaful companies not having capacity, and then either they dissipate or cannot just compete. And I think we need to hold their hands. We need to hold their hands and support this. And in the fullness of time, if it is well established and well balanced, and Shakib is an expert on these issues, we will find both local and regional and international Takaful companies supporting this. And the most important thing that I would want to say is that I would like to see these, either the pools or the joint agreements, to be led by regional, local Takaful companies.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for having respected the time. Driss, the floor is yours. Merci à Shakib, merci Mohamed Akoub pour votre contribution et surtout d'avoir respecté le timing. On va pouvoir passer
Thank you for
maintenant.
your contribution, for having stayed within the time, and I'm now going to give the floor to Driss Hafez for the closing ceremony or word. Thank you very much for this sterling moderation, and also to Mr. Shakib and Mr. Mohamed. We are now going to give you the floor, dear participants. We would like to know. We would. Désolé, vous me disiez.
My head. So we will now move on to the actual.
Not finish.
No finish. No. I know. Sorry, it's going to be too much otherwise. So we now switch on to English. You know, every time there's a mistake like this happening, I always say, "Thank God there is a human being in the room." You know. So thank you for correcting me on that. And so here we are. So this is now your time, dear participants, to tell us exactly what you want to ask to our. We will now have the quiz on the screen quickly. You have in the chat already the link again. It's the same link as before, the same code if you're still already logged in and still logged in. Here is what I suggest. If you could ask a question in the language of your choice, as you did before when you talked about your expectations, and please do specify which speaker you're addressing the questions to. We're going to have now on the screen the actual responses. If we may have the actual responses on the screen.
We had many questions in the chat. Sorry, كان عندنا أسئلة كثيرة في الشات. في ناس بتقولي مدى.
There were numerous questions in the chat box. Some of them asked, why does it take 8 years for profits to be made? I didn't say 8 years necessarily. It could be profits that could be made after 3 years. But what the general rule is that you have to have stamina. For example, life insurance, you can make profits by 3 or 4 years. You need a minimum of 7 or 8 years. Any more questions, Idris? One moment, please. There are people asking a question about difference between conventional insurance and Takaful. Takaful rests upon the Sharia compliance together with the differentiation between the shareholders and the subscribers. So, and the profits are distributed with the distribution of the insurance surplus, which makes the insurance, the conventional insurance and the Takaful insurance distinct from one another. But when it comes to risk assessment, it's the same. But in terms of investment and business models, so there is a radical difference, namely that revolves around the Sharia compliance. Any more questions?
Look at the other questions we have on the chat, as we're having a little technical problem with the voting tool. So the quiz tool. Apologies for that. We also have some questions which are asked in the chat. So we have collected those, and I will now review those. Do apologize for that. The actual tool itself is having some problems.
Il y a quelques questions d'ordre très général sur lesquelles
there are also general questions on which we don't have the time to really talk. Mahdi would like to understand how the concept of the Takaful and the traditional insurance are. I urge you to go and see different sites and read on internet, Google, on trading.fr.com. You will have a lot of contents, and it will be difficult. It will be too pretentious to try and introduce you to this long topic in just 2 minutes. Alors, il y a une question.
أنه أو البلدان أو الشركات اللي المبتدئة في التكافل أنه
Takaful companies, especially beginners, how could they benefit from support? So over 20 years, so I kept being contacted by companies from Eastern Africa, Algeria, Gambia, Morocco, and elsewhere, asking me to organize appointments with the senior Takaful companies. So when the latter were always quite welcoming. For example, the Abu Dhabi company, so they have always been interactive. So the Bahraini company, also the Solidarity ones, so they were quite responsive and very interactive and ready to give answers and support. So the Sudanese also have been quite supportive, and they have been pioneers in the support they have provided. Every single time companies try to touch base with the Sudanese companies, so the Sudanese would support them. 2 companies in Qatar so have been founded by a Sudanese colleague, and they are excellent companies. Should there be no questions, or maybe Idris wants to take the floor?
The chat, we have collected those, and we're going to use those in the meantime until we unblock the tool. So, okay. And Ustad Shakib Abu Zaid, you will redirect those questions as needed, please. Why is there no insurance on marine pollution in our waters? No, I suppose maybe no Takaful insurance. Why is the Islamic economy not tested globally?
أنا أو بنخلي واحد يجاوب على الموضوع.
مرحبا. The Moroccan government has validated the Takaful model and has been heard for a few months. When will Takaful really start in Morocco?
في سؤالين يا إدريس. السؤال الأول فيما يخص التلوث.
Regarding pollution, so marine pollution, so there is a civil responsibility on every single time there is a ship. So its captain and the owning company is responsible for pollution, and every time there is pollution which is due to whatever commodities are on board of this ship or else.
Why is the Islamic economy not tested globally? So this is a question we had also in the expectation. Why not in
اليوم لما بتعمل صكوك، إذا أخذنا الصكوك على سبيل المثال، في صكوك.
So when you have sukuk, you have sukuk in the UK, in Japan, in France, and those issued by Bahrain and by KSA. So the people that invest most are foreign and Western companies. So with the significant development and so Takaful, so maybe is lagging behind. However, So we have significant developments in those sukuk. So if you take the example of Malaysia or others, so we speak about $10 billion. So if we speak about the Arab Islamic Bank for Development, so its rating is AAA, and it has been so for more than 3 decades. And every single time there are sukuk, so those sukuk are highly in demand, actually. So this is the end of the webinar. So we should put an end to the Q&A session and then put forward a recap.
All the questions, and we will do an extra steering committee after the event to answer all the questions we have had. There's already some questions that have been put in the original opening of the event. Some have gone into the chat. We have a number of questions, obviously, that we will reclassify and address post-event. So this is obviously our commitment as a scientific committee. Thank you very much for my part for attending. Apologies for the technical hiccups on the quiz tool. You have it online now. If you want to still ask your questions, we won't treat them instantly, but do please, through the link you have on the chat, keep asking your questions. There is one more thing from my part that I would like to say is that we will kindly ask you to fill up or fill in an assessment form, which is only composed of a few questions, but this will help us improve for the next event. And obviously have your feedback, especially to that. Thank you to our dear speakers. Thank you very much. Ustad Shakib, the final word is yours.
أنا أول شيء بدي أشكر الناس اللي بفضلوا منه كان هذا.
First of all, I would like to thank the people without whom this event would not have happened. First, SCR Morocco in the person of Mr. Fassi Fihri. I would like to thank the Tunisian reinsurance company in the person of her managing director, Madam Lamia Belmahmoud, who's always supported our federation. I would like to thank the panelists, and indeed, Mr. Mohammed Barbi had to leave, but we'd like to thank him anyway. Mr. Mohammed Asghir, Mr. Mohammed Aqoub, our colleague Osama Abdin. I would like to thank every single one of them for their contributions, because we've taken away from their valuable time, and we would like to extend our gratitude to Idris Ghaffas, who has worked with us with his full heart and mind without asking for anything in return. He represents IFAS. I would like to thank Abu Bakr Ajir as well. We at the General Arab Insurance Federation, we are looking forward indeed to having more webinars on similar topics. We'd like to further explore some of the key topics in the various market-related industries, and we hope to be up to standard. If there are any suggestions with regard to the type of subjects that we're covering, or in terms of co-sponsorship, we will welcome you in open arms. We are here to serve everybody. For brothers and sisters from the General Secretariat, would like to thank you very much, and I would like to extend a particular expression of thanks to you. Thank you very much for this beautiful webinar. We reached up to 250, 260 participants, and as I'm speaking now, the closing remarks, we still have a couple hundred participants, so we look forward to more. Now, just a quick observation that between the 10th and 13th of October 2021, our federation will organize in Algeria its general conference, and it will be in person, but also partly virtually, so it'll be a hybrid format. And I hope that all the brothers and sisters who could be with us in Algeria or online, they will make the effort to be there, because your presence in such a General Assembly, there will be a great opportunity to learn from each other, to meet with other operators, with partners and clients. Thank you all very much, and have a great day, and looking forward to meeting you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shakib. Thank you very much. Thank you from our side as IFAP, as a co-organizer. I would like and also concur with you, Mr. Shakib and Mr. Idris, for all of the thanks that you've addressed to our sponsors and to all of the speakers. And also thank you to the audience and a diversified public. We have people from the four corners of the world. Unfortunately, we cannot answer all of the questions. We hope we'll be able to cater for them later post-event. Thank you all for having followed us, and thank you for having been numerous in following us on this very technical topic that is not much talked of. I really encourage you both to GAIF and to all professionals who are listening to us to continue your efforts of pedagogy and investments and awareness raising and giving greater exposure to this topic, which is structuring, to say the least, for the industry and of our sector. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Merci.
Assessment form in the chat. If you could please just click on it. It's only a few questions, and it's always good to remember how we can make these events better for the next time. Thank you again to GAIF. Thank you to IFAS and to our dear sponsors as well, and to all the participants, and of course the speakers who have made this event. As Boubacar rightly said, a wonderful overview of the Takaful industry worldwide. Thank you very much. No.
Bonne fin de journée. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.